There are so many more innocent people in prison than people realize.
They arrested me for the murder of my best friend.
When I got arrested, I kept on saying I was innocent. What are you doing? What are you doing?
It's not fair that he had to stand in that courtroom and accept guilt for something that he didn't do.
There's no physical evidence linking him to this crime.
And there was absolutely no investigation.
Nobody cares that you did not commit that crime.
No one believed me.
He shouldn't have been in jail for 34 years.
You gotta let him go. That's not him.
You're free to go. Thank you very much.
In the early 90s, American criminal defense attorneys created a network of international associations called the Innocence Network.
I'm free, man. It's been 30 years.
Their mission, to fight injustice by exonerating innocent people and helping the justice system correct its mistakes.
This is a worldwide human rights movement.
Anybody can be mistakenly identified. And how many times do we have to see this?
I really don't know what they said to release me.
Today, I filed a motion to null pros or dismiss the charges against Lewis Fogle.
What are you looking forward to the most?
Getting to know my family.
Until the judge says you are absolutely free, there's always nervousness that it's going to go wrong.
And you have to trust that's going to go well, but you don't know.
For many convicts who claim to be a victim of a miscarriage of justice, these attorneys are their last chance, their last resort.
It felt so good actually having people that believed in my innocence.
I couldn't do this without them.
I thought I was going to die in jail.
I believe that one day they would come and say, you know, we made a mistake, we were wrong.
You know, I kept fighting for my freedom for 34 years.
I would have never believed this stuff is true. Not until you live it.
Is this the letter that he wrote to them? Oh my God. Okay.
Dear Innocence Project, I'm serving life for a homicide and rape that I'm innocent to.
I'm completely innocent of this crime. I wouldn't waste her time if I wasn't innocent.
This nightmare has been going on almost 17 years for me. Please help end this injustice.
God.
I would be very grateful if you could help me to get the DNA test ran to prove that I am innocent.
He's written that to us, you know, and it went from 17 years to 20 years to 25 years to 30 years.
I thank you for your time, he says. That's crazy.
You're free to go. Thank you very much.
Since the early 90s, attorneys from the Innocence Network have freed 372 wrongfully convicted people in the U.S., thanks to advances made in DNA science. 20 of them were on death row. Together, these former detainees spent 4,563 years in prison for crimes they did not commit.
Think about how you would go through this. Like, would you be able to survive that experience?
It's the best job in the world.
I think the problem with this job is it never feels like enough.
The reasons behind these wrongful convictions are often similar. They are mostly eyewitness misidentification, confessions extracted under duress, improper forensics, or false testimonies. This is exactly what happened to the detainee whose story you will discover today.
A 15-year-old girl had been raped and murdered.
He wasn't there to hug his children. They just kept asking, where's Daddy? When's he coming home? Is he ever going to come home?
I totally did not think I was going to cry. Prison is very hard on people. It's very hard on them.
Lewis Jim Fogle claims to be a victim of a miscarriage of justice. Karen Thompson works for the Innocence Project in New York. With her intern, Dara Gell, a law student, they agreed to defend him. This is their story. Karen Thompson joined the Innocence Project in New York in 2012. This 43-year-old attorney chose the job to defend the rights of women and the oppressed. Soon after her arrival in the association, Karen inherited a case of a client who had been in prison for a long time. Lewis Jim Fogle. The crime at the center of this case took place in Pennsylvania on July 30th, 1976.
So in 1976, a young woman, 15-year-old girl named Kathy Long, was at her friend's house. She left the house and started walking home, and there was a car in her driveway. This 15-year-old girl stopped at the window and then got into the car. And that was the last time anybody ever saw her. Her body was discovered the next day by a man who was just out picking blueberries to eat, and he found her body and he called the police, and the investigation began.
A 15-year-old girl had been raped and murdered. It's tragic. It's a devastating story.
It was in the newspaper. And I really didn't pay much attention to it.
At the time of the crime, Jim and Deb were not yet an item. Jim lived in the countryside with his 3 brothers and earned his living as a laborer. As Karen discovered in the file at the beginning of the investigation, the police did not mention Jim at all. Indeed, the first witness accounts describing the driver in the car led to a very different suspect, a patient at a mental institution.
Can you find the Lola Long police report? I'm curious about her description of the man who was in the car who comes to their house. The last person to see Kathy is the sister of the victim, and she tells the police exactly who she saw in the car. She gives a very explicit description of him, and his name is Earl Elderkin. Earl Elderkin eventually checks himself into a mental institution. The police go back to him maybe 5 times over the next 5 years to talk to him about the murder. And every time they talked to him, he gave them a different story. And in each story, he talks about different people. But in each story, he's the only person who is at the scene of the crime in every single one of these instances. So it's a complete mystery why he was never the only sole suspect in this murder. It's a complete mystery. And Earl Elderkin is dead, so we can't actually talk to him anymore. So when I sat down to read Jim Fogle's trial transcript, it was one of those moments when you do not understand how this person could ever have been convicted. It's a travesty.
From 1976 to 1981, neither the witnesses questioned nor the leads followed up by the police led to Lewis Jim Fogle. At that time, the 30-year-old laborer was quietly building a life. He married Deb and became a father. His name was only linked to the case 5 years after the crime, following a final visit by the police to Earl Elderkin.
And in this last interview, when he's in the mental institution, he's put under hypnosis. And he says, I saw Lewis Jim Fogle with his brother Dennis Fogle and 2 other men rape Kathy and shoot her in the back of the head. And from that moment on, the police start to focus on Jim Fogle.
At the end of 1980, we got married. And in March of 1981, he was arrested. We had 2 boys. And it was pretty hard. Just, he was there and then he was gone.
On March 18th, 1981, Lewis Jim Fogle was arrested with 3 other men named by Earl Elderkin while under hypnosis at the mental institution in what seemed like yet another version of the story. All four were taken into temporary custody while awaiting their trial. The wait lasted 11 months, or 335 days. 335 days of detention that will change the course of the investigation and seal Jim's fate.
About a quarter of the way through the trial, they dropped the charges against everybody except Mr. Fogle. And the reason they do that is because he's the only one who allegedly spoke to these police informants while he was in prison. So basically, he's convicted on the testimony of what we call snitches. You know what? We never did find this tape, did we?
Which tape?
Of the snitches?
No. I think somebody asked for it years earlier and said it didn't exist.
Oh, right.
But
okay.
We never.
Right. As the Innocence Project, over and over and over again, we find that when snitch testimony is involved, there's usually a wrongful conviction somewhere because it's incentivized. If someone says, I'm going to give you this if you tell me what I want to hear, you're usually going to tell the person what they want to hear. And that's exactly what happened for Jim. It's the only evidence that was used to convict him of this murder, the only evidence. And because of that, he was sentenced to life in prison.
It was life without possibility of parole. My heart just dropped.
He shouldn't have been convicted with such terrible evidence.
I felt like I lost him. And I cried. I didn't know what else to do. Because I knew he didn't do it. I knew it in my heart that he didn't do it. And no, he wasn't there to hug his children. I don't know, they just kept asking, where's Daddy? When's he coming home? Is he ever gonna come home? That was the hardest. That was the hardest.
On September 24th, 1984, Jim was sent to one of Pennsylvania's highest security penitentiaries and sentenced to life. Locked between walls, the man from the country worried he might fall into depression and lack the strength to prove his innocence and return to his family. To fight this, the young father decided to take up painting. Art helped him escape, set him apart from other prisoners, and above all, forced him to keep his mind sharp. Because to be able to paint in prison, one must be resourceful. Jim had to create painting tools out of elements of his daily prison life. And when he ran out of money, he made his own colors from flowers found during walks or rationed coffee beans.
I don't know that I could have been that creative, that's for sure, but...
He was painting artwork that he would give to other prisoners to give as gifts for Christmas to their families.
It's like a handkerchief, kind of a prison issue fabric, and he turned it into this entire project that basically became his lifeline, you know? It's the thing that kept him sane.
I think Jim absolutely survived in prison because of his art.
He sent me a lot of them. I have them hanging around my house.
The years passed, and Jim didn't just paint in prison. He also devoted much of his time to studying his case in the hope of proving his innocence and finally being reunited with his family. He filed several motions for appeal. Every single motion was rejected by the court, one after the other, year after year. In 2002, he discovered the Innocence Project and decided to write to them after having exhausted all other possible legal reviews. By then, he had already spent 21 years in prison.
Is this the letter that he wrote to them? Oh my God.
Dear Innocence Project, I am serving life for a homicide and rape that I'm innocent to.
My name is Lewis Jim Fogle. I would be very grateful if you could help me to get the DNA test ran to prove that I am innocent.
Respectfully, Lewis Jim Fogle.
Respectfully, Lewis J. Fogle.
I thank you for your time, he says.
Upon receiving the letter, the Innocence Project agreed to take on Jim's case. At that time, Karen wasn't yet working at the association. Her predecessor had been handling the case for 9 years and had been searching for evidence to be tested. In 2010, when he finally got access to the medical swabs taken from the victim after the rape, he thought the case was resolved. So did Jim. Unfortunately, the samples were too old. The laboratory found no biological evidence for analysis. For Jim and his family, all seemed lost. He had already spent 30 years in prison. 30 years removed from his family, with whom contact was decreasing.
At that time, we weren't in contact with each other. We had stopped writing. I don't even know why I stopped writing. I mean, I still loved him. I still wanted him to come home. He was turned down for so many times. And I don't know whether I just gave up on it, that he would never come home. But I always had hope.
This is the letter when they just started testing in 2010. Wait, did you say you had the results?
Yeah.
Can I just peek at those?
In 2013, the attorney leading the case moved. Karen took it over. With her intern, Dara, they started the investigation from scratch and called Jim in prison to tell him.
The first time we called Lewis, he sounded like an old man. Prison is very hard on people. It's very hard on them. And when you've been in prison for 30 years for something that you didn't do, I think it ages you, and I think it takes a very big emotional toll.
It was scary at first to speak with Lewis. I knew that his case wasn't going that well. We didn't have any evidence. We'd had his case for a long time and nothing was happening, so it was hard to say, I'm going to fight for you and I'm going to be your new student this year. I hope that I can do something differently.
If we don't find anything, he's still going to be in prison, and he might be there for the rest of his life.
When Karen took over the case, the Innocence Project had already been working on it for 11 years without success. They managed to find and test the medical swabs from the young victim, but no biological evidence was found. 3 years after this setback, Karen had to dive back into police reports to see whether other leads should be considered or if the case should be definitively closed.
Part of that research, when we go through the trial transcript, when we go through all the paperwork we have, is to look at what the police collected. And so we go through their entire investigation as well. And what we found was the list of everything that they took from her body. There was still evidence that we hadn't found. So we knew that her clothes were still around. We knew her underwear were around. The shorts that she'd been wearing that day were around. And that they'd also taken her fingernails. And they'd combed her pubic hairs. And so my immediate thought was, let's go find all of these other things.
My specific mission, as told to me by Karen, was to try and find any evidence that I could in the case. Working at the Innocence Project as a student is a huge responsibility because ultimately, if we didn't find evidence this year, we were most likely going to have to close the case.
To find new evidence and to attempt to get Jim out of prison one last time, Dara focused on the list she found with Karen in the police report.
I took that property receipt and I called the police station. I just got bounced around from headquarters to Indiana PSP. I called the wrong corporal, and then eventually I got just put on the phone with the person who could look it up at the right moment. And I asked, do you have this inventory? He said yes, and I said, are there 12 items in this inventory as it says on my property sheet? He said, as far as I know. I said, can you do a physical search for me? And he said, yeah. And that afternoon, he wrote me an email saying, yes, we have, I believe it was 9 pieces, including the underwear that you asked for. I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional. I had just started here, so I didn't know how shocking it was, but I knew that this was the evidence we were looking for, and for some reason, we couldn't find it. So it was incredible. It was incredible, yeah.
I was thrilled. I did not expect this to happen at all because I really thought it would take longer. I thought we'd be really struggling around it, and she just found all of the right people who helped her uncover all of this information.
So new evidence was found, but it still needed to be tested. In March 2015, Karen sent it to the lab. If these final tests were negative, the Innocence Project would no longer be able to help Lewis Jim Fogle. At that time, Jim had been in prison for 34 years. To avoid unnecessary costs, evidence was tested one piece after another, starting with the victim's underwear. In June 2015, Karen and Dara received the first results.
It was inconclusive. We didn't find anything on the underwear, and it was devastating. The underwear was what we thought would be, you know, the key evidence. We thought that that was going to be where we found the DNA, but we had other items. So pretty immediately after getting the email saying there was no DNA on the underwear, Karen and I said, what else can we test? And Karen said, okay, next let's test the fingernails. The fingernails also didn't have any DNA. And again, we were really upset, but quickly said, what's the next item to test? And that's when we got to the pubic combings.
They take the pubic hairs and they basically put them in a chemical bath, and they get everything off of those pubic hairs. And so what they found first was semen. So they found a sperm head.
Finding sperm at the Innocence Project is finding like a buried treasure. It's pretty gross, but that's the Innocence Project thing, is find sperm.
And then they tested the fluid itself, and they got a profile, a male profile, and he did not match that profile. Jim Fogle is excluded from what we found on the pubic hairs.
To leave no room for doubt and confirm these first positive results, Karen also sent the victim shorts for analysis. They confirmed the first results. The sperm was not Jim Fogle's. After 34 years, the amateur painter finally started to believe that his nightmare would come to an end.
I was so excited to tell Jim that we'd excluded him and that we could finally now give people proof that he didn't do it. And I said, Jim, guess what? You're excluded. And he said, yeah, I know. I mean, that was such a shocking moment because, of course he knew. He knew he didn't commit this crime.
However, Lewis Jim Fogle's legal battle was not over yet. On July 29, 2015, Karen sent the DNA results to the Indiana County Attorney General in Pennsylvania and asked for the exoneration and liberation of Lewis Jim Fogle. The Attorney General then reopened the investigation. He had 30 days to find new incriminating evidence and to decide whether to take new legal action against Jim or to officially find him not guilty. However, he immediately agreed that Jim could spend the 30 days awaiting the final hearing out of prison. The release date was set for August 13th, 2015, sooner than Karen and Dara had imagined, and so they failed to be present on the day.
I wanted to be at his hearing so badly. I believed I was going to be, and then my flight got delayed, and I didn't get to be there.
I was camping in a tent in a very rural part of the country. I didn't really have phone service. I'd walk around with my phone like this to get a text message because I knew it was coming. So I would call in, I'd try to figure out what was happening.
She was literally in the middle of nowhere, so she barely had like cell phone contact. I understand her frustration, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And finally, David, my boss, told me, yeah, it's gonna happen tomorrow. He's getting out. So I actually couldn't be there, and that was very sad, but at the same time, I was so overjoyed.
On August 13th, 2015, at 63, and after 34 years of detention, although not yet permanently freed, Jim was finally outside.
And when I heard that he got bail and I knew he was getting out of jail, I, again, cried hysterically. I just was so overwhelmed with joy.
Yeah, 13th of August was quite a day. Once I walked out that door, I can know the excitement actually hit me. You know, it happened, I'm free. You know, it's not just a dream. You know, that was the most magnificent feeling in the world.
13th of August was amazing. In the bottom of my heart, I always knew that day would come. And when they walked him in handcuffs and shackles, orange jumpsuit, I lost it. It was a very happy day. A very happy day.
I'm just glad the Innocence Project took it and stuck with me all this time and helped me out.
What are you going to do tonight? What's the first thing you're going to do?
I would love to get me a steak. I haven't had beef in a long time. We get suey instead of beef, and I do not like suey.
When someone's released from prison after that long a period of time, it's an extraordinary event. It's extraordinary for Lewis, it's extraordinary when you're there as the lawyer, and it's pretty spectacular when it actually happens, when the court actually says that the client is going to be released. Like, that's a huge thing.
He spent almost half of his life in jail. 34 years, 3 decades, it's incomprehensible to me. I haven't been alive for 3 decades.
You know, I'm 43. I was, 9 when he went in? Think about your life. Think about what you've done in the last 34 years.
Jim and his attorneys knew this freedom was only momentary and could be snatched away, while waiting for his final hearing that would decide on his return to prison or his freedom. Jim used his 30 days to rekindle his relationship with his grown-up sons and grandchildren far from the public eye. Away from the hustle and bustle, he also discovered the countryside he had painted for 3 decades.
At least here I can go out and run around in the woods if I want to. It brings me back to nature and back to being who I am. I'm a country boy. I was born and raised in the country. I love the country. I get along better with animals than I do people. I don't know how to act around a bunch of people. I was afraid I was waking up from a dream, that I was going to wake up in prison, you know, as if all this was just a dream.
The 30 days wait, it was like, is there another shoe going to drop? Is he going to go back?
There's always nervousness that it's going to go wrong and that your client is going to end up back in prison.
There is a fear that rationality won't win because he shouldn't have been tried in the first place, he shouldn't have been convicted in the first place, and he shouldn't have been in jail for 34 years with such terrible evidence. And there's always a possibility that craziness would happen and he would get retried again.
So now that Jim is out, please don't do anything that could even get you on anyone's radar. I don't want you to drink. I don't want you to do anything except, you know, eat your meals and read a book and go to bed, because you don't want anyone to look at him and give them a reason to start anything up.
So for the 30 days, the DA wanted to, wait to decide whether he wanted to retry the case or not. I had to walk on pins and needles the whole time, because one mess up would have put me back in prison, and everything I worked for 34 years would have been over.
Hi, Lewis. We're downstairs. We are. Okay. All right, we'll see you in a sec. Actually, can we come upstairs? There he is. Because I think we're going to take some of your pictures.
September 14th, 2015. This time, Karen and Dara were able to make the trip with David to be part of the final stage in Jim's legal battle. They were due in court at 2:30 for the Attorney General's final decision. Was Jim going to be sentenced again, or definitively going to be found not guilty?
I am scared to death.
He was really nervous because it was everything he'd been saying. It was the end of the road, maybe. And he'd been so disappointed so many times. I think Lewis thought, it's been so close to the end for so long, how can it really be the end?
Okay, so let's put these in the car. Do you have another box, or do you want to carry them loose? We are going to put these paintings in the car and then show them afterwards, and hopefully people would be interested in buying them. So, but we want to show the world Lewis's talent, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, what a day.
All of those pictures that we put out there were a testament to his incarceration and his way of surviving that experience. And so we want people to see them. You know, we want people to witness that, but we want them to buy them. We want them to understand that this is also how he's going to support himself. Like, this is the one skill that he got to work on that wasn't taken away from him, that he got better at as he was in there, and that he should be, you know, it would be great for him to be able to make a living doing this art.
Indeed, regardless of the result of this final hearing, Jim would never be compensated. Pennsylvania law doesn't allow for financial compensation of convicts who are victims of a miscarriage of justice. But before exhibiting his paintings, Jim would have to return to court 1 more hour before his fate was revealed. 1 hour before knowing if his battle of 34 years to prove his innocence would pay off. Karen was there to reassure him.
We'll see by 2:30. I can't sleep.
If you're not. I had 34 years of teaching myself not to show emotion. Because emotion in there is a weakness. You know, even saying thank you, I have a problem with it. You know, because it's something I haven't used in a long time. Psychologist, you know, she said it's going to take time.
Yeah.
You know, so.
You were in for 34 years.
Right.
You've been out for less than a month.
Right.
It's going to take a long time.
Yep.
I want you to know that you're not alone, right? So you're in the company of 330 other people.
Right.
You're kind of
part of the family.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, we wish you weren't part of this family in some ways, but you're not going to be the only one with this experience. Right. There are going to be people for you to talk to who know what you went through. Right. And I think, you know, this story is really humbling. I think you're hearing what he's survived, and I don't think a lot of people have that kind of character or disposition to be able to handle this kind of thing, and I am humbled by this man. I'm very humbled, and I feel very privileged to be able to support him. It's like teaching me a lot. You really are. You're teaching me a lot. Waterproof mascara today.
It was time for the hearing. Surrounded by his attorneys and his wife, Jim made his way to the court. At this moment, nobody knew if he would emerge free or handcuffed.
Again, until it happens, you just don't know that it's going to happen. Up until the very moment where that document was signed and where the judge said, you know, this is done, and in the United States we say it's done with prejudice, which means you can't revisit it. You can't come back and say, we're going to try him again. Once that's said, it's over. So, till the last minute, we were biting our nails. And in 5 minutes, it was done. In 5 minutes, the judge decided he wasn't going to be retried. In 5 minutes, the DA agreed.
Today, I filed a motion to null pros or dismiss the charges against Lewis Fogle in the case pending against him. As you know, this was from a 1976 rape and murder that occurred here in Indiana County. Through work with the Innocence Project, we were able to determine that Mr. Fogle's DNA excluded was not present on the victim at the time of the incident. The judge entered that order with prejudice, meaning that this case is now over and will be over going into the future with regard to Mr. Fogle's involvement.
I tell you what, whenever I came out of that courthouse, I had no idea they were going to stick me right on that camera. The thing is, stepping out into the world, I really don't know that much about it. After 34 years, you know, everything's changed. And I have no idea how to use the internet. I don't even know how to use my phone properly yet.
Well, you know what a cell phone is. You know how to use a cell phone.
I got a cell phone, but using it is another thing, you know. I was scared to death until I got up there and a couple of questions was asked. After a few questions, you know, and looking at the people, you know, I was able to ease up.
Having the whole world witness his innocence, I think that was it was a very powerful moment, I think, for all of us.
What are you looking forward to the most?
Getting to know my family.
Oh, tears of joy.
Put your arm around me, damn it.
Our future together? Don't know yet right now. We're still talking. Hopefully we'll be together to watch our grandchildren grow up, get married.
You like doggy?
Hey, doggy.
Doggy kissy?
Mwah.
Oh, that's my sweetheart.
There's a lot going on for him right now. So I'm just trying to be his friend and trying to let him know that I'm there. So he calls me. He has my number. We're still in communication a lot.
Having a great time.
No, it died. We're going to be here for 15 minutes. His hat's getting in my eye.
Both of them have become such a big part in my life. You know, I love them both. I like having them around. I love talking to them. Now is to build a life.
What?
Now is to build a life.
Now to build a life.
Amen.
I hope Lewis will always be part of my life. I hope to always know him. This experience of working with him will absolutely help me be a better advocate, a better lawyer. I will always be grateful to him.
The worst thing is the moment you have to say goodbye because they have to go back to New York. You know, it's almost heartbreaking. Thank you.
Start it all over. Okay.
They became like family. They are great.
They are.
Yeah.
Can I kiss?
If you spoke to Hollywood and said, I have a great movie idea for you, they wouldn't take it. They would say, there's no way. This isn't believable. Nobody would accept that this could ever happen to anybody. And it happened to Jim, and it happened to his family. And he missed out on all of his life and watching his kids grow up because of these insane circumstances that you would never think were, plausible.
After 3 decades spent in prison, Jim now had to find his bearings in a new century, a new world. A world that has spoken much about him since his release.
I didn't think I was this famous. Not this many places. My God. This is beautiful. Boy. I ought to take up a few languages. Sweden. Made of places I didn't know of. Italy. Belgium.
I told him this Yeah, because I saw, oh my gosh. I saw Ireland, yeah, I saw all of these countries.
Yeah, it was so exciting to see it go everywhere. Yeah, it's exciting that people in France get to know. I love it.
Oh, wow. I didn't know to use that one there. Heck of a change, ain't it? Never believe that's the same man. Never believe that it's the same man.
Lewis made this for me as a Christmas present. It's the first client gift I've ever gotten, and I just think it's extraordinary.
Missed calls.
Don't know how to use this thing.
Missed calls.
Yeah, I got it, Mr. Fogle.
Missed calls.
You gonna tell me that again?
He's picking things up. He's doing really well. Adjusting.
When I got arrested, I kept on saying I was innocent. What are you doing? What are you doing?
You gotta let him go. That's not him.
I kept fighting for my freedom for 34 years, you know, after so many letdowns.
I believe that one day to come and say, we made a mistake, we were wrong.